you're all feeling full of science and energy. The buzz when I came in, a lot of very excited people. Everyone's going to sleep well later, I think. That's parents and children. So I can see we have a big duck in space here, and I think that's what inspired you all to come along. But thank you for joining us on Friday afternoon. My name is Lucy Paine, and I am a member of the TechSpark team. TechSpark is the Swindon, Wiltshire, Bath and Bristol tech community. I look after the community here and in Bath. So I would say I'm definitely not a techie. I just love technology, and I love everything it enables. But I also love history and science, and I spent a wonderful, it was only an hour, I could have been in there all day, with Laura on Tuesday exploring Royal Science Museum. I'd heard of it, I hadn't been, I didn't know what to expect. I could never have appreciated the scale, the diversity, the complexity, and we're going to give you a little flavour of that in the next hour. It's only an hour. There's a call to action, you can go and see it next year. But we want to give you a little bit of a taster, inspire you, and maybe you'll get involved as well. But that's the background. Put your hand up if you want to ask a question. We want to make it interactive. We've got some slides, but it's not death by PowerPoint. We're going to talk about a few topics, but just pop your hand up if you want to have a proper question or if you're inspired the moment to get involved. Laura, thank you for joining me. Tell everyone who you are, what you do.
So my name is Laura Humphreys. I work for the National Collection Centre, which is part of the Science Museum Group, and it's just down the road in Wroughton at what used to be RAF Wroughton. And it's not a museum, it's a museum store, so it's where we...
Apologise.
That's all right. It's just important that people don't turn up expecting an exhibition. It's much cooler than that. So it's where we store about 80% of the Science Museum Group collection. So that's the Science Museum in London, but it's also the National Railway Museum, the National Science and Media Museum, and the Science Industry Museum, and another railway museum called Locomotion as well. So we've got a really, really broad breadth of collections. And it's about... as of today, I did check on my way out, we've gone over 330,000 objects at the site, so that's really cool.
And it's everything from the vast to the minute.
Yes, yeah. So we've got some things which are absolutely like really, really tiny, sort of size of a pinhead on a slide. But then we've got railway carriages, buses, aircraft. We've got the world's first hovercraft, which is massive. I've no idea how it hovered. But yeah, some really cool stuff.
And tell me about the duck.
So the duck, this duck, is a very important duck, and that's where we get the title of the talk from. So there was, in 2014, there was a mission, it's called the Rosetta mission, to land a spacecraft on a moving comet for the first time ever. And that comet, which is called the Churyumov-Gerasimenko comet, or 67P, which is a lot easier to say, 67P is about the size, about the shape of a rubber duck. So when the Ptolemy team, who work on this at the Open University, were planning where they could land on this comet, they used this rubber duck. So you can see where it's got letters and numbers written all over it. Those are the different places that they could potentially put their lander down on. So they sent it up, and then they sent it flying around the comet several times, and they worked out which of these sites was going to be the best. And then they did manage it. They successfully landed a spacecraft on a moving comet for the first time ever. It's a really cool rubber duck. It's not the only cool rubber duck we've got either. We've got loads. They've played a surprisingly important role in science.
Why?
I don't know. This one is obvious. It's because of the shape of the comet.
Yeah.
My other favourite rubber duck in the collection, it's part of a set of bath toys called the Friendly Floaties. And there was a storm in 1993. These were being shipped from China across the Pacific Ocean to the United States. A container of these toys and the rubber ducks went overboard, and they've been used, they've pretty much worn out now, but they've been used ever since to map ocean currents. So oceanographers very often use a cargo that's gone overboard in a storm to find out how the oceans are moving. But because this was a container full of bath toys, they were perfect for it. So they were able to map them arriving all around the world. We're not sure that any ever arrived in Britain, but they definitely made it to Europe and Portugal, all the way from the Pacific Ocean. So it was really amazing.
It's a brilliant accidental experiment there.
Yeah, rubber ducks everywhere. They're great.
And what I actually failed to ask you is, how did you end up doing what you do?
Oh, completely by accident, I think. I knew I wanted to work in museums. I did a history degree, which you absolutely don't need to do, but then I graduated. I didn't really know what to do. And I emailed some local museums, and I said, oh, are you looking for volunteers? Because I was sort of temping in an office, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do as a job. And then one of them came back to me and said, we don't really do volunteers, but we're going to look for tour guides soon. Do you want to come and do that? And our tour guides do a bit of everything. And I just thought, I found my people. These are the right kind of nerds. I love working in a historic house, and So that's how I ended up in museums. How I ended up working on this, it was just by chance, really. I started at the London end of our move because we're moving out of Blythe House in West London, which is a huge Victorian building. Used to be the Post Office Savings Bank. It's an amazing building, but a terrible museum store. Very, very leaky. Very, very warm and cold, and that changes a lot. And we need to be careful in our stores that we don't change our temperature very much because it can damage our objects. So we're now moving into this new building at the National Collection Centre, and then as the collection moved, I moved with it. So that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, as you said, amazing house, but really not designed logistically at all.
Oh no, not at all.
In so many levels.
It's beautiful. Blythe House is absolutely incredible, but there's like over 100 rooms with Science Museum objects in at the moment. Some of them are like a large cupboard, and some of them are the size of a football pitch, and they're all difficult. There's not a level floor in the building for moving things around. It's really difficult. It makes a lot of weird noises at night as well, which some people don't like. I think it's cool. But the new building is all level floors. It's only on 2 levels, and we can see everything all in one room pretty much, isn't it? It's one large room. So.
But also a key thing is it's a living room because collections are coming in and coming out, so there's always a movement. So it's not like nothing's stagnant.
Yeah, exactly. We say it's the collection store, and about 95% of our collection is in storage at any one time. That's true for most museums. What you see in the museum is a tiny, tiny bit of what actually exists, but it's always moving in stores. So we have things going out on exhibition, coming back from exhibitions, and they go out on loan all around the world as well. We've got lots of things on loan to Steam locally as well, so you can see lots of Science Museum objects at Steam, and that's really good because very often they're objects from all around the world, all around the country. They should be where they're important, so that's why that sort of loan programme is really important. And we're always collecting new stuff as well.
That leads us to our next slide, doesn't it? We have a little train on the next slide.
Have a little train, yeah. So
could be familiar.
This little train is a Swindon boy. So this was made by a legendary Bluebird toy company in Swindon. And it's a Thomas the Tank Engine fun machine. So you use it to make different things with Play-Doh. And that was actually one of the first objects we moved into the new building. And it was, we didn't know what we were moving at first, but we realised that in one of our very first boxes we had a Swindon-born object. So it's one of our favourites now.
I see you have full-size trains coming as well.
We have a full-size carriage going into the new building. We don't have any full-size trains going into the new building.
You say yet then,
Sorry,
I suppose.
Yet, yeah. Also, my colleagues at the National Railway Museum would tell me off for that. You meant to say locomotive, not train. I don't know why, but they get really angry if you don't say that.
We're not trying to be rude, and there's another train.
Yeah, so this is saying about having lots of objects on loan and moving all around the country. This is the Caerphilly Castle. So it was the prototype of the Great Western Railway's castle class, and this is actually on display at Steam in Swindon, and it's the one that you can walk underneath. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I don't get trains, locomotives, but I loved walking under this. I loved seeing it from a different angle. It was really, really cool.
But he's a prototype. What's he made out of?
Oh, it was the first ever of the castle class, so
okay.
It's one of the bigger class of trains that Great Western made at the time, steam locomotives. But it's not made of carbon fibre or anything.
The one we saw was you've got a kind of a smaller size end of carriage, haven't you? That was wood. That was kind of a prototype of.
Yes. Oh yeah. We've got lots of models. I reckon we've got the best collection of models in the world. But it's not a collection. They're all over the place. But models are really good for telling stories. And one of the things we've got is a condensed size railway carriage that was used to sell railway carriages. So you have lots of cool things like that.
And it's one of those things that could quite easily have got destroyed over the years because it was a functional tool, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's in perfect condition. Imagine that was just taken around the world to sell the carriage, as you say, and one of those who are left outside, it's not robust, is it?
No.
So it's preserving is another key thing. I know you mentioned some, especially plastics, really don't last.
No, we've got lots of different materials in the collection. Something like the Caerphilly Castle is made of pretty strong stuff. But then when we have collections of experimental materials like new modern plastics, carbon fibres, we don't know how long those will last. So it's all a bit of an experiment. We try and preserve them for as long as we possibly can, but we know that that may not be long. And the other thing we collect as well is digital objects. So we really have no idea how long they will last. A lot of people assume a Word document or a picture might last forever. We don't know that. Based on some of the software and the data that we have from earlier computing in the 20th century, it probably won't last forever. So that's really difficult, but our conservation team are working on how can we learn more? How can we better preserve something like a JPEG or a PNG file? Because if we have a piece of parchment, we can give you a good idea of what that will look like in 300 years. We have no idea what a JPEG will look like in 300 years.
And you mentioned your hovercraft and things like rubber does not like aging, does it?
Oh, no, not at all. There's nothing you can do with rubber. It just becomes brittle and breaks, unfortunately. The hovercraft would not hover anymore, unfortunately.
A big hover, has it actually still got the rubber attached to it?
It has,
just very delicate.
Yes, which is one of the reasons that is not actually going into the new building, that one. Staying exactly where it is, nice and still, so we don't have to worry about it.
And moving on, we've got dye. So, you know, from the hovercraft scale to dye. And I thought about chemical history, because this is taking another part of it. I mean, that bottle is beautiful. It did lead me down to a sort of darker question about some of these being maybe more dangerous fluids.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've got really dangerous collections as well, but it's fine, they're cool. So I think we've got the biggest range of hazards. So we refer to them as hazards in the collection. It means dangerous things. But that's a huge part of what we do at the National Collection Centre, is we learn to manage them properly. And there are the obvious things that you might think are dangerous, like we have a lot of sharp surgical instruments, we have a lot of old medicines, and especially when you go back to the Victorian times, a lot of their medicines we would now consider an illegal drug. So we have special legislation which tells us how we manage things like that. But with the dyes, you think, oh, that's fairly innocent. You wouldn't want to drink it, but it's a fabric dye. But actually, we have some which are a shock-sensitive explosive. So if you knock them over or you drop the bottle, they would explode.
I can see some issues with that.
Yeah, and they become more volatile over time, which is a lot of fun if you're trying to move them down the M4.
I mean, yeah, we used to gargle with mercury and things, didn't we? There's also a lot of heavy metals that we all thought would save the day that actually killed you. One of my favourite, I love this slide. So when we're walking around, I described it as a bit like Pinterest in real life. It's like, oh, typewriters, and then there's just walls of them, and they're of every age and style, and the beautiful, intricate workings on them, and the pre-QWERTY ones.
Yes, yeah, so we've got lots of different typewriters. They're really gorgeous. We've got circular typewriter, where all the letters are in the wrong order. We've got some Chinese language typewriters, musical notation typewriters, braille typewriters for days. If you want typewriters, we can help you.
Absolutely really beautiful. Great. But that was kind of sensory overload, is you have so many types. And then there's telescopes, isn't it, and microscopes. And there's just every flavour and variety you can think of, and ones you can't think of. I've never seen the circular ones. But the artistry of these pieces, back when businesses, livelihoods thrived because of typewriting, it was the high tech of its day. Yeah,
absolutely. That's the thing. A lot of people walk around, they get quite a lot of nostalgia in the stores, but actually a lot of this stuff was really, really cutting edge technology. I mean, so this is not actually a typewriter. I don't know if anyone knows what this is. Any guess? What do you reckon it is? Spot on, young man. Very good.
We have no prizes, but well done.
Yeah, but
I would have known that.
You have my admiration. Very well done. So this is a four-rotor Enigma machine. So it's one of the German Enigma machines. And the Enigma ciphers were broken in Britain at Bletchley Park, including by famous scientists like Alan Turing. We actually have a couple of different Enigma machines, which is really cool. This one has arrived at the National Collection Centre already. So we haven't just got... Sometimes people think the museum sort of reserve collection or the collection in store is the rubbish stuff. It's not true. We've got the best stuff. And we've got loads of it, and it is always changing, like I say, but you'll be able to come and see one of the Enigma ciphers, and then parts of the bomb that help to decode it, the BOMBE from Bletchley Park as well. So, it'll be really good fun.
It's amazing. And then we go on to robots. Again, this is why we can't, I feel like however many slides we had and however long we had, we'd never get through everything you've got there. So this is just a little selection, but 2 robots of very different scales.
Yes, so these are 2 of my favourite robots, and I think I'm so lucky to have a job where I can pick my favourite robots. So this big one here with the black background is called Kronos, is also known as the Eki-1 or the Eki robot. And this was sort of an art and science project to make a robot, but you can see it sort of looks a bit like a skeleton, but not really. The man that designed this felt that human consciousness and the mind couldn't actually be separated from the physical body that it's in. So that's why he based a lot of the design on Grey's Anatomy for the skeleton of the robot. And then the other one, which is much bigger on this slide, but is actually tiny and would fit on my finger here, is a Robo-Bee. So that's one of the bees built by Harvard University, and it can either operate on instructions, or it can think for itself, or it can operate as part of a colony of these robo-bees. And they're looking at different ways of using them, like using them in disaster relief zones where we can't get into small gaps to see if there are survivors or if there's gas leaks or anything, particularly in earthquake zones, or for pollinating crops as well, where bees and insects are sort of struggling to survive.
That feels very relevant with Syria and
very
Turkey,
relevant.
yeah.
There's some really, so we have got some really old stuff, but we do also have the really cutting edge stuff that's sort of not out there yet and all in prototype.
But that's 1/10 of a gram.
Yes.
You need
it's
one
like
of your microscopes
smaller
to
than a
look
penny.
at
It really could fit on my finger there, yeah.
But the fact that something that tiny can have intelligence.
I think it's mind-blowing when you see it compared to some of the supercomputers we've got that would fill a living room. They're enormous and they have a fraction of the computing power.
Yeah, I mean, think the power in our phones these days, isn't it? That would be
Yeah.
there'd be a room this size, wouldn't it, full of computers
Yeah.
50 years ago. And then you've got everything. So that you go, what's your oldest piece, roughly? How far back do we go?
So we've got a brick. It's really exciting. We've got a brick that's got cuneiform writing on it, and it's one of the earlier examples of cuneiform writing, so that's thousands of years old. We've also got a carbon dating kit, and there's some fossils in there. So I think on a technicality, those fossils
So the
probably
earliest
win.
man-made is the brick. What's cuneiform?
So it's my ancient history degree, come on, you were useless for so long. I'm pretty sure it's a Babylonian language.
Wow, okay.
So it's several thousand years BC,
Gosh.
that sort of thing. And it's part of our building and architecture collections. And they come all the way up to carbon fibres, building cladding, all the way via sort of Victorian building technologies, ferroconcrete, all that sort of stuff. So it's lovely to see the span of age in subjects as well,
Yeah.
if you see what I mean.
That's that narrative, isn't it? Which is one of the most important, not one of the, is an important part of your role is telling the stories.
Yeah, and every object tells different stories at different times as well.
And different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this first slide really made me smile because we've talked about a lot of very beautiful things and a brick. And then we have these because you're collecting historical context.
Yeah, so I put this one in. I don't always put this one in because it's very, very familiar and not very remarkable. But in 100 years at the Festival of Tomorrow, this might be amazing for people to see. We've done a lot of collecting around the coronavirus pandemic, both on the science side and the development of the vaccine and different treatments, but also on the social history side, how it affected people's everyday lives, which to most of us, that's really familiar at the moment, but in 100 years it won't be. When we first started thinking about what the Science Museum should do, we asked, what do we have from the Spanish flu pandemic in the early 20th century? Nothing is the answer. We have very, very little ephemeral material from that time. We have very few objects to tell the story, and a lot of the objects that were involved in any kind of medical care were burned for infection control. Yeah. So we were trying to avoid that mistake for the future, but 100% the curators of the future are going to hate us because we've done something wrong. But we're trying our best.
It's not perfect. You're capturing the moment in time. And yeah, a lot of people said, what can we learn? But it had been 100 years, and we weren't collecting. And I thought it was really interesting what you said, how long this electronic, because we might all sit here thinking, it's all on the internet. In 100 years' time, they'll find it on the internet, they'll Google it. What will the world be in 100 years' time from a technical communications perspective? We have to find some way of saving just in case that isn't the case. Yeah. We hope it doesn't happen again. We know it probably will. And I was really privileged to see something very special and random, which I didn't expect to see when I came to see you on Tuesday. A little miniature Stephen Hawking. I mean, why not?
This is one of my favourite object changes every day. It depends on
that's why I love your job, is because there's nothing you can't love in there.
And at the moment, because we're doing such a big move, what's on the shelves changes all the time, which is really good fun. But this is our most recent whole collection. We usually collect object by object, but this is a new whole collection. And it's the contents of Stephen Hawking's office at Cambridge University. So we've got lots of really serious stuff. We've got his diplomas, we've got books that he wrote, we've got lots of diplomatic gifts and awards that he won. But we've also got some really human stuff. We've got like his biscuit tin and bleach and everything from the cupboard, Because, yeah, he's a world-leading science communicator and a great physicist, but he's also got to offer his PhD students a cup of tea and a biscuit.
I liked his base unit with the NASA sticker on it. It's like,
Yes,
you know, it's cool. Everyone thinks a NASA sticker is cool.
Yeah, but it isn't an object from NASA. We do have objects from NASA with those stickers on legitimately, but it was just because it was funny to put a NASA sticker on his wheelchair. We've got 6 of his wheelchairs because his wheelchairs were changed as his motor neuron disease progressed. And we've had teams from Intel come to help us understand because they were working on really bespoke communication technology for Hawking a lot of the time. So they've helped us to understand that. But then we've got really cool stuff that shows he had a sense of humour, like this action figure from when he appeared in The Simpsons and his wheelchair was a helicopter.
And he had his signed Monty Python picture
Yes,
as well, didn't he? So it showed another layer of him. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the cleaning fluids, and there was a debate about, you know, what's important to keep, you know, and you said, you know, there was a debate around whether those were relevant to be kept, but as part of that collection.
I think so. I'm a bit biased. I love domestic history, so cooking, cleaning, looking after children, and that tells us a lot about who we are and who we want to be. And I think it's really important that we keep things like the bleach, the sponges, the really domestic bits of his office, because it isn't just a place where great physics happens. It's also a place where a human exists.
It feels like sanitising history, isn't it? Let's just show what we want to keep and pretend that he wasn't a real person.
Yeah, but you want to show that he was a human being.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we don't know what people will want to know in the future. So we don't know if there's somebody in the future who may be looking at these really domestic, everyday things, and the only reason these will have survived is because they belong to Stephen Hawking. So someone might be looking into them and finding out more about their history, and they're not interested in Stephen Hawking. They want to understand how we kept things clean in the 21st century. So,
and again, I think it's very important when we look at the past is to try and tell the whole story as much as we can. I know that's very difficult because people like to have isn't it, you know, the story's always told by the winner if it's a war story. You know, it's like we want to show the whole wrapping around it, and we also want to look at, you know, if there's problematic elements of it. It's trying to give a rounded perspective, not just the bits that we feel we should talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And objects tell different stories over time. They'll become relevant for different reasons. It's always changing.
And we talked a little bit about problematic items and problematic people. And again, I think it should be a conversation that we have. I know it's been very prevalent recently, especially in Bristol. But I think it's better good to talk about it and understand and learn from it rather than pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the way that the museum collection, that's how it speaks naturally, is it tells you all of these things and it just presents you history, and you can't walk away from it, you can't hide from it. But it's great to have the option of telling those stories and exploring them in different ways. And as things change over time, as we learn more, as we become more sensitive to things like having a statue of someone like Colston in the middle of a multicultural city and what that means to different people, it's important that we can reflect and change how we look at things.
But don't whitewash it. I think this is it.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it, didn't we, about sort of discussing our heritage and learning about the East India Company, which I can never say, but actually learning from it and making it a constructive conversation. Yeah. Not just kind of changing all the names and taking the statues down and go, oh, that's fine, we've got rid of that now. It is a thing that happened. We need to talk about it. And then we're going to go to something completely different now.
Yeah, something a bit less serious. Does anyone know what this is? Have a guess?
A hose pipe?
Sort of. It is a hose pipe. It is a space toilet, yeah. So that is a hose pipe, but it's going in the other direction, thankfully. It's not pointing at you. This is a toilet from the Mir space station. So this is the kind of toilet that astronauts are using in space.
It looks glamorous, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a good one, but people don't think about, or sometimes people do think about these things a lot. You know, a lot of engineering time from some of the best engineers in the world working at NASA went into making this toilet, because you don't have gravity in space. So if you poop and you don't have gravity, you need a suction system to make it work.
Anything changed through liquid is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, so we have lots of cool things like this. We also have a pair of Alan Shepard's underpants from the Apollo 14 mission, which is really gross and really cool.
That's quite weird, isn't it?
Yeah, because astronauts, everything they take into space with them is custom made. It's really, really carefully thought out, including their underpants.
How do you custom make underpants? What's different?
Well, I believe they're for the flight.
Okay.
Which means they can't take toilet breaks. So they're officially called a urine extraction system.
Oh gosh, so you've got soiled underpants.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. I was talking about dangerous things in the collection. That qualifies as a biohazard.
Did they get to go through the wash first?
No, because that takes away the historical context.
I probably don't want to see that one next time I come. That's okay.
Oh, they're cool. Everybody loves to see those. Yeah.
But again, it's all the context, isn't it? Because your first response would be to pop them through the wash, wouldn't it? But no.
Yeah, no, conservation would kill you for that. No, don't wash it. But we talk about this a lot with objects. Our conservators, they're not restorers. They try and preserve the object for as long as we can, but that doesn't mean sort of repairing it and bring it back. Sometimes it does. But a good example, I'm going to talk about a museum I used to work for, which is a bit naughty. I worked at the National Maritime Museum, and we have Nelson's uniform that he died in there. Wow. If you'd washed it, you would have lost the bloodstains from the bullet wound that killed him.
Yeah.
So there's really important stuff in dirt and mess and in objects that have broken because they've been used. So I believe the toilet is clean, though. I'm very aware that we've got a toilet on the screen. I think that one's fairly clean.
It looks quite clean, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the things we also saw, this is going away from toilets now. I mean, I saw one of the Daleks. How many Daleks have you got?
I think we've got 4, and we've borrowed another one for the science fiction exhibition, which is in London at the minute.
And this was one that was just the front, because it was wheeled around, wasn't it? It wasn't a full Dalek, and it was quite an old one, wasn't it?
So we've got replica Daleks, we've got Daleks that were actually used, we've got the ones with the full back, and we've got the ones where someone would go in and be able to move it around. You can never have enough Daleks, I don't think.
I quite agree
They're all
with
different colours as well.
And it was the bicycles as well. There was a whole section of just bicycles of every shape and size and potentially life-threatening to recycle. Some of them were, yeah.
I really don't know, and I would love a better historian than me to tell me how we arrived at the penny farthing as a sensible bike design.
Yeah, you draw that up, you make it, and people are like, don't be silly.
You think, if you've never seen a penny farthing in real life, they're huge. They're taller than me, some of them.
Falling off of that's going to break something.
Yeah, exactly. I've no idea how long did it take us to go, actually, if we just make it a little bit smaller.
And what of these did you go in? I mean, we went up to the first floor and I kind of looked over the balcony and it kept on going. How big is the space?
So it's about 27,000 square metres, and we've got about 30 kilometres of shelving. And the shelving's about half full at the moment. We're still unpacking and moving in.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really hard to visualise.
Well, it makes me think of Indiana Jones. You know, when the Ark of the Covenant's in one of those boxes and you have all those shelves of boxes and cool things. It's like that. But, as you said, you know what's in them. My favourite sentence from you is that you know where it was and go on.
Yeah, and if we had the Ark of the Covenant, we'd know why it would make your face melt and we'd stop it. So it would be safe to look at the Ark of the Covenant. We also don't keep most of our things in boxes. Because the store has no windows, it's very tightly controlled, we can have our stuff out on the shelves. So when you can come and visit us next year, you'll just be able to walk up and down and have a look and ask us, what is that? We might know, but there's 330,000 objects or so in this building. If not, everything's barcoded and we'll be able to scan them and find out what they are for you as we go around as well.
And you had loads of boats.
Yeah, loads of
ship
which
models. weren't they, in clear, set up because they had their own little sort of microclimates in those boxes because, again, as you said, ships are notoriously delicate.
Yeah, they're made of wood and string and lots of organic stuff, so they're really fragile and they're affected quite badly by humidity when the air gets wetter or it gets drier. So they're all in bubbles, but they look like ghost ships in the fog then.
They look really cool. And Hugh Laurie's dad's Cambridge rowing boat.
Yes, we got from
which
the boat
was
race.
Vast.
It's like, they're huge. The modern boats are much, much smaller, but it was a winner. It won the race for Cambridge in 1934 or 35, I think. And yeah, it's 4 Olympic rowers rowed in that boat, so we've got some real boats as well as the ship models.
It's beautiful, but just kind of walking past it, it just kept on going, didn't it? Yeah. And we have another nice random picture.
So we do have, as you saw from the beautiful purple dress earlier, we do have some textiles, but there's usually a science reason for them rather than a fashion reason. Although I would wear this, I think this is cool. This jumper was knitted with the wool from Dolly the sheep. It was her the first wool. So Dolly the sheep, if you don't know, she was the first adult animal that was cloned, or she was the first animal that was cloned from an adult cell. So she was their first clone. And you can see Dolly the sheep in the National Museum of Scotland. We have the second cloned sheep. I want to say her name is Shirley.
I don't know. So we have
no, I feel really bad for her because no one ever remembers her. They only remember Dolly.
Like the second man on the moon. It's
exactly.
Poor Shirley.
Exactly. But yeah, it's really cool that we have the jumper as well. And we have lots of objects like this where you look at it and you think, why has the Science Museum got that? And actually, everyday objects tell lovely science
I
stories.
think the randomness is lots of stuffed sheep everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you have a large taxidermy? Does that kind of come into that? It's not really science,
We
is
do
it?
have some taxidermy. We actually have a railway collection dog, so he went...
Oh.
He worked on the railway, and then when he died, they had him stuffed and put in a glass case on the railway platform. That's quite common. I think there is one in Slough still. They have one of their railway collection dogs in taxidermy in his case.
Oh.
He's telling a railway story for the National Railway Museum. So.
Yeah. Very
And not too much taxidermy, which is good because a lot of old taxidermy is covered in arsenic poisoning.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And also,
Everything is dangerous. This job will ruin antique shopping for you forever.
but also, as you said, there's some collections which people are quite sensitive to, like a lot of the medical collections.
Yeah, so we try and be careful as well. We've talked a lot about sort of funny things like space toilets, but we do have a really big medical collection. It's about half of our objects by number. Everybody's got an experience of health and medicine, and you never know what somebody's been through that was traumatic or painful. So we do try and warn people that there is some really great stuff and really important stuff, but there might be something in here you find difficult as well.
And some of them are beautiful.
Yeah,
The actual
truly.
machines, even if you're not quite sure what they do, they are works of art.
But that's the nature of a medical collection, is it's all moving us forward, and it makes you think, I'm really glad I live now and not when like dentistry drills were powered by a foot pump. I'd really like the person who's got a drill inside my head to have a steady hand. But also the nature of a medical collection is there's going to be a lot of tragedy attached to it as well.
I mean, and from the huge to the tiny, all the keys.
Yes, our locks and fastenings collection. That's really, really lovely. We did a research project a couple of years ago called Who Cares? And it was about unloved collections. And we picked our locks and fastenings because people don't come and see that one very often. But when you see them all laid out, they're really, really beautiful. And they tell important stories as well.
And that leads me to research, because although it's not open to the public at the moment, people can come and engage from a research perspective.
Yes, they can. So our library and archive is open, and we've got really, really cool stuff in the library and archive as well. And then from next year, you'll be able to see the objects and the library and archive all together. But there's some really, really brilliant stuff in the library and archive if you'd like to come and have a sneak preview.
I mean, a key thing, I think, is to get engaged and to ask and to become involved. Because it's next year, isn't it? It'll be open to the public.
Yes, so from 2024, we're going to be open to the public. And if you'd like to see a little bit more, some of my colleagues are in the Future U Hall down at the end, and they're coming back tomorrow as well. And they've got a video of what the new store is like. Lots and lots of boxes in it that haven't been unpacked, but it gives you an idea of the scale.
And it's not a museum, so the experience will be very different. I found it differently immersive because of the intensity and diversity of all the different shelves everywhere you look. But it isn't like going through a curated experience of the Science Museum, because it is, you say, it's living. So if you went, say, this time next year, and you go a couple of months later, there'd be a whole different
Yeah, there'd be different
collection
things,
there.
especially in places like the Conservation Lab or the Photography Studio. There'll be a whole different set of objects and moving around, so you get to see. And it'll probably depend very much on who your tour guide is as well if you're coming in on a tour. But if there's something particular you want to see, and this is a message that I want you all to take far and wide, all museums have got stored collections. We don't really own them. We look after them for you. So if there's something you really wanted to see, get in touch with the museum and ask. And that's what we cannot wait to start doing again next year, is to let people come in. Experts are always welcome. If you're writing a book about our valve collection, come on in, have a look at the valves. But if you just want to see something because you're interested, because you think it's cool, that's also fine. You can come in and see
you
it.
have volunteers as well, don't you?
Yes, we do. So we've got a volunteering programme. So if you wanted to get a little bit of a head start, we've got some volunteering opportunities. And we're also advertising for lots of jobs now. We've got the new building as well. So if you keep an eye on the Science Museum website, if you'd ever be interested in doing something like that, that's always an option as well. And very often you don't need any museum experience. We will train you up.
And you might see a cheering stage and some sheep and some solar panels and a
Yeah.
film studio opening up next door. It's the most surreal location, isn't it?
It's a really cool place to
It
work.
is cool.
It's always changing. The weather can be a challenge sometimes because we're on the side of a hill. But apart from that, it's absolutely fantastic.
It was kind of misty. It was very moody on Tuesday when I came to see you, and then the sun came through.
Yeah, when the sun breaks through, it's nice. We had a day where we brought lots of colleagues from the northern museums down for a tour, and we had that dense freezing fog, and we brought them down to see this enormous new building that's 4 times the size of an aircraft hangar, and you couldn't see it. Really glad they
Absolutely
made the
typical.
200-mile journey for that one.
Did you have a question?
No, I was a volunteer.
Oh, you're a volunteer?
Oh, amazing.
Brilliant. What do you love about it?
It's lots of different stuff. It's kind of like going to a shop where everything you wanted to buy is on display, but you can't buy it.
It's really intense, isn't it, as an experience? What do you have a favourite item?
No, it's just interesting seeing all the
The same as Laura, it varies each week.
I'm down in one of the old hangars, not in the new building, so and they are cold.
They are very cold. Very occasionally, clouds form inside our aircraft hangars, which is part of the reason that we are moving as much as we can into the new building. Not everything can move into the new building, and the hangars are cool in a different way, I would say. But yeah, they can be a challenge.
Two favourite objects I could name. One would be a very old piece of concrete, I think, with the metal in it.
Yes.
The earliest bits of concrete or something.
Yeah, we've got some
Which is
turn
very
century
mundane,
ferroconcrete.
but just fascinating.
Mm.
And the last printing press in Fleet Street.
Yes.
Still there? That must be
Yes,
still
it
there.
is. Yeah, so that's not going into the new building because it's bigger than a
Can't
house.
be moved.
It can be moved, but the problem is if we put that in the new building, it means 1,000 other things can't go into the new building, and it's made of pretty strong stuff. So it's known as the Woods Press, and it's, like I say, it's bigger than a house. It's absolutely massive. We have a viewing platform for it. And it was only 1/3 of the whole printing press setup, and it was printing the Daily Mail on Fleet Street, and there were 3 of these enormous things printing it.
Wow.
It's amazing. But the concrete, I think that's a nice, like, circular story. Blythe House, where we're moving out of, that's one of the first buildings, although it's very ornate and Victorian and red brick on the outside, it's one of the first reinforced concrete buildings in the UK.
Reinforced concrete, that was the
What does a normal working day look like for you? What do you get involved in?
Oh, sometimes it's spreadsheets in the office.
Oh,
I don't like
that
those
sort of
days.
days,
No,
is it?
that's a bit dull. But I have to be honest, that's what it is sometimes.
Yeah.
But also we have a huge database of everything. So a lot of it is sort of, my team, we sometimes describe ourselves as history detectives because you get presented with an object and you don't know what it is. We don't have a record for it. We don't have a photo for it. There's some missing information or something's gone wrong. So you have to unpick years and years and years of it was acquired in 1856 and it's been out on loan here, and unpicking all of that stuff can happen quite often.
That sounds really cool.
It is good fun, but you have to accept that sometimes you'll never find out, and those are really frustrating. But the best one we had, or the longest one we had so far, we had a mystery object that we didn't know what it was and tried to work out what it was. We'd collected that before the Science Museum existed. It came from the Great Exhibition. It was a weight for part of a machine.
Okay.
So that's a mystery from 1851 that we were able to fix.
That's really great.
That's a really satisfying day at work, even if it is just like a weight that's quite nondescript.
Because I've seen all the boxes you've got to open. Do you have some days where you just are literally opening those, going through them, categorising them, as you say, putting the codes on?
Unfortunately, the unpacking team get to touch everything and see everything, which is a really cool job, I think. And we've got quite a big unpacking team at the moment.
Yeah.
If I have to go and look at a box, it usually means there's a problem in the box. Like there's something that's really dangerous that we're not sure has been through all the hazard protocols, or there's something where we don't know what it is. But I don't mind that. I've also done the jobs where I got to handle everything.
You could lose days, couldn't you, just unpacking boxes? As you say,
yeah, definitely.
You talk about being Blythe House and just kind of being down and downstairs, just immersing yourself in it.
Yeah.
You've got to be passionate. As we said, you're never going to get bored of this. It's not a job that ever stagnates.
I don't
more
think
things
so.
are always
The
coming.
spreadsheets maybe, but never the objects. And I have a theory that everybody who works in somewhere like the National Collection Centre is there because we get to touch the stuff, which you never get to do in a museum. So that's really cool. And you get to spend time with it and you get to explore the things that interest you. It's really, really cool part of my job.
Do we have any questions? Go.
The supercomputers.
Yeah, go.
Yeah.
What supercomputers have you got?
Oh, we've got computers going all the way back to Charles Babbage, who's sort of known as the father of computing, but he was a Victorian, worked a lot with Ada Lovelace, who's the first computer programmer back in the 19th century. So we've got a replica and many, many parts of the Babbage difference engine. So in many ways, the first computer, and it doesn't look anything like a computer you would imagine. It's mahogany and brass and cogs. And then we've got things like a Ferranti Pegasus, which is a 19 40s, or the computing curator is wincing somewhere because they don't know the exact dates. We've got an Elliott 803, and that's all full of tapes and
Your
glass
knowledge is entirely
doors.
encyclopedic anyway. You can't, you know.
I know, but if the curators were here, they'd be shouting, "You're wrong! You're wrong! You're out by a year." But yeah, we've got loads. And then something like the Elliott 803, where it's cabinets and cabinets and a special desk, and it takes up a whole room, has less power than probably is in this setup today.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're absolutely amazing. And then some of the supercomputing stuff we've got, some of the most modern and really cutting edge prototypes we've got are some of the small boxes that were attached to Hawking's wheelchairs for his communication technology from Intel. The computing collections are amazing, but also terrifying.
I love the computer museum here. It has all the sort of the games, and he said all these things we need to keep.
Yeah.
Even the ones that didn't do very well. We need all the different examples.
Oh yeah, you need all the failures.
Yes.
All the failures are how we get to the successes.
Yeah.
I think someone was talking today earlier about nuclear fusion. We have a part of the Zeta fusion reactor which never achieved fusion. It sort of failed on that front, but it resulted in loads and loads of really important steps forward that have got us to the recent fusion reactor that has achieved fusion. You don't get there without all the failures.
Yeah, have to keep those stories. Go on, you had a question.
So having visited the Rawton site a few times over the years when it used to open occasionally, when it reopens, obviously, will it just be the new building that opens, or will you actually be opening those old hangars? Because there's some fabulous stuff in those, like the planes, for instance, and the buses, and the really big stuff.
So we will where we can. The problem with the aircraft hangars is they're now reaching the end of their lives, and some of them are unsafe in parts. They're certainly not ideal conditions for objects, so we're moving a lot of objects out of the aircraft hangars to get them into better storage.
Yeah.
But so the buses, for example, most of the buses are coming into the new building.
Right.
But the aircraft won't be. The hovercraft won't be. Alas, my beloved hovercraft. But
It does
if
look a bit ropey, I think. 10
yeah,
years ago, it looked
I
a bit ropey.
wouldn't trust it on the water anymore. But if you do want to come and see something, we'll do everything we can to make that accessible as long as it's safe.
Yeah.
But most of the access will now be in the new building, just because that's where the vast majority of the collections will be. We'll also have the Library and Archive Reading Room, which is open to the public now. You can still book to come and see that. We'll be doing a lot more library and archive in the new building as well. But if you're coming just to see rare books or some of our really large format stuff, we'll still be showing people the library down the bottom of the site as well.
Can't wait.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
It's amazing. Like you say, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I could move in.
I can't wait to have people back as well. It's been so frustrating because I love collections.
Yeah.
It's probably come across. I'm a massive nerd about this stuff. And it's been really frustrating to say no to people for 4 years because the move has been so big, so dangerous. When something's in a box, it's in a box for a year, going through the transit process. So it's really lovely to be starting to make plans to open up and allow people to book to come and
living
see
again,
whatever
isn't
they want.
it?
Yeah, that's the whole point. And there's been so much investment in the site. The new building is not a museum, but it's very much built with access in mind. We've built it with different things in mind to make sure that we can bring people in when they want to come, whether it's for a school trip or a public tour, or to come and see an object that they want to see. That's like baked into it. So
Absolutely.
open for good.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Laura. I say the call to action is check it out next year because it's ridiculously cool and you might fall in love with some concrete. Who knows? Thank you.